They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Hi guys! Welcome to Shut Up and Watch. My name is Alicia. I'm a junior at the College of William & Mary, and I decided to make a podcast about movies and TV and pop culture and all the other stuff that my friends have to put up with me ranting about all day. Today, we're talking about Annihilation, and my guest is my friend Rahul Truder.
Hi guys, it's Rahul. I'm also a junior here at William & Mary, and Alicia and I have been friends for a very long time. And we both saw this movie about a month ago when it came out in a nice empty theater, and we loved it, and we want to talk about it with you guys, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the movie, and have seen the movie.
Oh, that was nice. Yeah, we were the only people in the theater.
No, that's a lie. There were two people
really
right in front of us, and it annoyed me that they sat right in front of us.
Oh, they came in later, yeah.
Like, there's a big empty theater, and you sit right in front of us.
What the hell is wrong with them? So, first, let's just go over a brief summary of the plot, hopefully without spoilers. Maybe I'll, mark when spoilers start, in case listeners haven't seen this. The movie centers around this army vet and cellular biologist named Lena, played by Natalie Portman, and she's hired to join an expedition into Area X, which is this, place cloaked in a mysterious entity called the Shimmer. It's kind of like a Bermuda Triangle sort of deal. Nobody comes out. The Shimmer's surface looks kind of like a soap bubble, very iridescent. And yeah, she ends up joining a team of 4 other women to enter the Shimmer and gather data and bring it back to the government lab set up next to the area. So the director and screenwriter was Alex Garland. He wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine, he wrote and produced Never Let Me Go in 2010, and most recently he wrote and directed Ex Machina, which
was an awesome movie.
was really good.
Really, really
you saw
good.
It too?
Yeah, I loved it.
He also wrote The Beach, the novel, and he wasn't the one who ended up adapting it into a film, actually. The film that ended up being made was directed by Danny Boyle, who actually worked with Alex Garland on 28 Days Later and Sunshine. He's the one who directed both those movies. However, Scott Rudin is the guy who first took on the project of adapting the book into a movie. He's the producer, and Garland joined in later. So yeah, the movie is based on a book, a 2014 novel by Jeff Vandermeer. It's the first of a trilogy called the Southern Reach Trilogy.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
I need to read those now.
I've heard it's good. At least, the first one. And, basically, people were mad at first when Natalie Portman and Jennifer Jason Leigh were cast as the protagonists, because the characters in the trilogy that they're based on are apparently Asian and Native American. But apparently Garland didn't know that yet when he started making the movie, because he'd only read a manuscript of the first book. That was all that was out yet. The second and third weren't even written. And so, I don't know, I guess we can give him a pass, even though, I'm usually a stickler for representation. But the film overall has a pretty diverse cast, which we'll talk about later. Anyways, the advertising was pretty limited, I feel like. The marketing was not huge. Did you see, many trailers before you saw it?
No, not really. And the ones that I did, it made me really want to see it, because, it told you nothing about what the movie was or what was going on.
Yeah.
I thought the whole idea of the Shimmer was pretty cool. And I really like Natalie Portman as an actor. I think she's kind of scary.
Yeah. You saw Black Swan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it was pretty small. It kind of reminded me of Interstellar. I don't really remember ever seeing trailers for that movie, and if I did, it was very abstract, just like the movie is. And I think that kind of tied into making it what it was, and just kind of delaying anything that you may learn, because a lot of trailers nowadays just give you the entire plot, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. The trailer really didn't reveal anything, and most of the people I've spoken to either hadn't heard of the movie at all before we saw it, or even still haven't heard of it, or they kind of had a vague, weird memory of seeing the trailer on their Facebook feed or something. I think I first saw it on Instagram or Facebook,
Yeah, I definitely saw it on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And it was like, I feel like all the ads I saw for it were like a month before it was released, and then it just kind of disappeared. It's weird because it's a big budget movie from like a big studio. It's Paramount. Even though you kind of, I don't know, I'd kind of expect conceptually for it to come from A24 or something like that. But everything about the movie itself is like the opposite of, you know, like blockbuster movie. They seemed to know that it wasn't going to be that big because they didn't have like a super wide release. Plus, outside of the US, they only had like a Netflix release. They didn't even have it in theaters now.
Yeah, I think it's a very niche kind of film. You have to be a big lover of sci-fi to really like actually enjoy the film. Yeah. And understand what's going on. That's the part that I loved about it. They actually went into the science behind it a little bit of like what potentially could happen. And then there was like a bit of horror involved. So sci-fi and horror are very like small in my opinion for like who that appeals to. Yeah,
and I'm wondering if maybe like they knew that. Maybe that's why the marketing wasn't huge, because they wanted to direct this to like the specific audience of who was actually going to like it. Yeah. Because the reviews that have come back have either been really good or just, you know, people being like, this is stupid and confusing.
Exactly. When you get that, I feel like that is like a telltale sign that this was meant for like a certain group of people. Yeah. And they did a good job of at least appealing to those groups of people. Like, at first, Alicia and I were talking about it, and she was only telling me it was a sci-fi movie, and I was like, nope, it's definitely a horror movie, part of it. Yeah. And it definitely came across as that. There were scenes where I literally, like, jumped out of my seat. Yeah. Which is fine, because it was a semi-empty theater. Yeah. With two annoying individuals in front of us. But it's whatever.
These poor people. No, I still hate them. And apparently, like, Alex Garland was kind of upset with the fact that there was no theatrical release internationally and that it was sold on Netflix, because like he says he has no problem with, you know, shows that are made for streaming services. Like he talked about The Handmaid's Tale being like one of the best genre pieces he's seen in a while, and it's, you know, made specifically for Hulu or for streaming. But the problem is, he said that Annihilation was made specifically for cinema, and I can totally see.
How does that work, that like something's made just for a streaming service?
I mean, not just for, I think it really affects the way that, like, they structure, like, now they know that people are binge watching stuff. Yeah. And that kind of bothers me a lot with some shows, like with Stranger Things, the new season. It felt very,
like, action-y all the time.
Yeah, or just not, I don't know, I feel like if this were, you know, before Netflix, the pacing would just be so weird. And I would forget what happens the next time I watch an episode. But because I'm binge watching it, like, I just saw what happened. But, you know, this, I feel like it's very apparent that it was made for a movie theater experience, because it's almost like spiritual or something. It's just larger than life, and really kind of screws you up.
Yeah, if I was watching this on Netflix, I would have to pause it several times to like, make sure I understood. But I think that's the entire point of the movie. Like, you definitely weren't supposed to understand everything, because if you do see the movie at some point, nearing the end of it, you just start questioning literally about everything you watched for about an hour and a half.
Which is my favorite kind of movie.
Yeah, that was like Interstellar for me. That's why it reminded me of it so much. Because you start out with like a somewhat logical plot, and by the end of it, you just like, all the shit just hit the fan. Like, we don't know what's going on. Which is great, you know, like that's what you want out of a sci-fi kind of movie, in my opinion.
Exactly. I think like one of my pet peeves is when people say a movie is too confusing and that's why it's bad. I think there's a difference between confusion and ambiguity. Like, confusion can often be accidental, but ambiguity can often be deliberate. And I love ambiguity. And, like, you know, if it's not your thing, though, like, it doesn't make you better or worse or, like, more intelligent or less intelligent, then it's just not your type of movie. But, like, I hate when people blame it on the movie. And I was thinking about how we all kind of accept Stanley Kubrick's 2001 as, like, a fantastic movie and part of the canon of, like, legendary movies. But if we could accept that, which is the pinnacle of ambiguity, then why can't we just accept this little movie, Annihilation? And then the reception was pretty good. Like, it has an 87 on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think Roger Ebert had a good review. It cost like $40 million to make this, and it made $11 million on opening weekend and 31.7 total.
Wow. I didn't know it had to complete with Black Panther.
Yeah, so
Jesus.
yeah, that obviously, it wasn't gonna beat that. And of course,
and maybe that ties in as well to why the hype about it wasn't as big. I mean, it's really hard to hype up this kind of movie when you're trying to hype up Black Panther as well, which is a unique movie in of its own and a part of the whole Marvel sequence that's about to drop, one of the biggest superhero movies that's ever existed.
Yeah.
In the Infinity Wars, basically. But yeah, I'm glad it was received well by critics. At least.
Yeah, same. So I'm gonna introduce the cast really quick. We talked about Natalie Portman playing Lena, who's the ex-army soldier and a professor of cellular biology, and then she's married to Oscar Isaac's character Kane, who is also a vet. They I think they might have met in the army.
Yeah, they met on a mission.
Okay.
She was a research officer, and he was part of the security team. And that's pretty much how they met.
Before we came in here, you said you didn't remember the characters' names, and now you're like dropping knowledge on me.
I'm a man of hidden talents.
Okay, well, Jennifer Jason Leigh plays Dr. Ventress, who's a psychologist at like the head of the government mission to enter the Shimmer and understand what it is.
She scares me.
She's so good.
She's very good, but she scares me.
She Jennifer Jason Leigh. The first thing that she was really in when she was younger was Fast Times, which is a movie I despise because it's just so depressing and oh god. But anyways, she's only been in good stuff as far as I can tell. She's just in kind of weird, not quite huge, skimming the surface of fame stuff. Yeah, recently I saw her in Good Time with what's his face, Robert Pattinson, and it was really good. I will never watch it again in my life. It's like Dunkirk, why would you ever watch it again?
Oh yeah, true.
And put yourself through hell and misery, but it was really good. And she just has incredible range. And I also love, her voice seems to almost have never developed past puberty or something like that. You know how her voice is just really, it kind of cracks a lot, and it just makes everything she says, creepier. When she, basically whispers Annihilation, which I found funny, saying the name of the movie in the movie, I was like, oh god, stop. But it's creepy.
I think they needed to, tell you why it was called Annihilation. But maybe that's part of the ambiguity. You could have left it to that.
Yeah.
That would have been smart.
And then Tessa Thompson plays Josie Radek. I think that's how you say it. She's the physicist in, the crew. I
loved her so much.
She's so good. She's just been in everything the past couple of years. She's coming up. She was in Westworld, Dear White People, which I still have to see. She was Diane Nash in Selma. She was in Creed.
Oh, damn.
And then she was Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok. The girl who's always drunk.
No, she's a great actor.
She was also, I didn't realize this until I looked it up. She was in the Jay-Z music video for Moonlight. It's a black version of Friends. The music video starts out with just all these actors being in a black version of Friends and talking about whining about how failed of an idea it is. And she's also apparently in some Janelle Monáe music videos, which I support.
That's the epitome of clout.
I know. Ew, he said clout. Okay, and then Tuva Novotny, she's Swedish, is Cass Shepard, and she's the anthropologist in the group that goes into the Shimmer. And so, okay, I looked at her last name, and I was like, that sounds Czech, because I studied in Prague in the fall semester.
That's
I'm more
right,
cultured than
she studied
any of you.
abroad.
And and then it turns out that her dad went to FAMU, which is the film school, the most famous film school in the Czech Republic. It's the place to study film, and one of the best film schools in the world. And one of my professors at Charles University also taught at FAMU. And basically all the famous Czech filmmakers, they've gone through that school. So he was also a professor there, and he was nominated for professorship at Charles University, which is where I studied. So I was I've got quite some ties to Tuva Novotny. And then we got Gina Rodriguez as Anya Thorensen. She's the paramedic, and she's from Jane the Virgin. And Matt really likes that show. I hear it's good.
I've never seen that. I'm trying to remember her character actually right now.
She's the one who's like badass and.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She's got like a Michelle Rodriguez thing going on.
I thought it was Michelle Rodriguez. Actually.
Really?
Yeah. No. I think about it.
Like anytime somebody's like Latina and tough and wearing cargo pants.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And then he's not really a main character.
I loved
but
his
I need
reactions.
to include this guy.
This guy.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Benedict Wong as Lomax. Is that how you say it?
For those of you who have seen this movie, he is like the funniest person because he's just asking the main character questions, Lena. And he's just like, and what? And then what? And then what? I'm like...
Yeah.
He's like on the edge of his seat, just dumbfounded the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to make of that. So, in terms of like the structure, the movie is, you know, it's got a linear structure and then some flashbacks in between.
Yeah.
And then...
Should we describe it?
Also... Well, first, let me say this one thing.
Yeah.
Also, because it's about Lomax, your favorite man.
There we go.
There's like cuts to this interview after Lena has gotten out of the Shimmer, and she's being interviewed by this scientist Lomax, Benedict Wong's character. And I didn't know, some people were mad about that because it felt like a narrative crutch, or like it was trying to be a way to over-explain things to the audience. Like, Lomax is the audience's surrogate, and that, you know, he's asking all the questions that we can't ask. Or I was wondering if maybe it's just to show us an outsider's perspective at the situation. And it reminded me of like a film noir type of structure, because it's really common for film noir movies to start with some sort of interrogation or confession or, you know, the end of the story. And then the movie takes you back to the beginning of the story up through the end. So you have the answer to the puzzle at the beginning, and then you have to watch the rest of the movie kind of knowing the answer, but like not being able to change anything, and trying to figure out how the answer fits into the question. So, I don't know. I thought that was interesting, and also she kind of functions as an unreliable narrator in that way, Lena does, because maybe everything she's saying is a total fucking lie.
Yeah, no, I really like that kind of setup, because if you do see the movie, you see how Lena does change over time due to like events that happen in the movie, and I only picked up on that nearing like the end of his questions. So at first I thought they just kind of like found her and there she was trying to debrief them on the situation, but it was only until I saw the scenes that happened later on that I started to realize that her initial answers to the questions, it could have been a complete lie and have different meaning than what I intended them to actually have. So I think that really helped me understand, because if we just started with them clarifying what the mission was and going into the Shimmer, I would have just been like, well, that was a good movie, but like I didn't understand the bigger significance behind it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit maybe about the world building and the visuals. So did you think, I mean, everybody's like talking about how beautiful the visuals were.
Oh my god, that shit was crazy. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I
liked the like scary visuals better than the beautiful ones.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're both beautiful in different ways, but like, I mean, I liked all of them, but the last half hour was definitely.
Oh yeah.
I was like floored.
Yeah. The concept in and of itself, I can't really reveal anything, but it involved like a lot of mutation essentially of what you think about in your daily world, and they just kind of went above and beyond of like going into the imagination of what our world would look like if we started switching things up in terms of genetic structure, and just kind of made you think how cool biology is and everything like that. But yeah, no, whatever they did with the videotaping and cinematics, what have you, I have no idea what the technical terms
videotaping. Whatever setting their iPhone was on.
Exactly. But yeah, no, it was awesome. Very, very good.
Yeah, I thought the creature design was especially cool.
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, this is gonna spoil things a little bit, but it's pretty cool.
Fine.
Yeah, so there's these things called Hox genes in biology, which pretty much determine the way that we are set up. So like humans, our Hox genes tell us like where our nose is, where our eyes are, how our bones are set up, and things like that. But the funny thing about those genes is that they're present in other organisms as well. So a fruit fly can have Hawk's genes, and they tell them where the eyes on the insect goes, where the wings are placed, and things like that. And geneticists have done experiments where you insert another gene or you alter another gene. And I'm not a biology major, so please correct me, someone.
Shit, you sound like one.
If I'm wrong. Intern of bio.
Oh, really? That's it?
Yeah. But basically, like, you can alter how a creature looks and give them features that another organism would have. So there was an example in the movie where the trees had the same structure of a human body. So literally these trees look like people, and they had flowers on them, but those flowers took on positions to make them look like they had fingers, like they had a certain shape of the head, and things like that, which blew my mind. Imagine if you were just walking in the forest and you saw a tree that looked like a person. Like, would you hug it? You know? Would you shake its hand, or would you be rude and like...
I would only do one of those two things. I wouldn't do anything else. Like, there are no other options.
I would talk to it. You know, like, talk to plants. You know? That's good for them, I hear.
Wow, yeah, local, inside joke. Okay. So, yeah, I thought that was so cool. The flower deer was one of the coolest parts.
I want one.
It almost, okay, don't hate me, but at some points, the visuals seemed like, they seemed not as good as I, like, expected them to be for some reason. And, like, kind of gimmicky.
You.
I'm sorry.
I will hate you.
I don't know.
I don't
it almost
see that
felt
at all.
like forced or something. But overall, I really liked them. And I liked the balance that they had of how much they showed, because I feel like if they had gone overboard and just had one, like, crazy magical living creature after the other, it would just become Avatar.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And
That's
so
a good
it, like,
idea.
walked the line very well in that way. And my favorite creature by far was the bear.
Okay.
So
I'm not
damn
sleeping
cool.
tonight. Yeah, that bear was just my worst nightmare, essentially. I don't really like bears. It kind of freaked me out. And then this bear was another dimension, to be honest. Please watch this movie if you haven't.
Should we just announce that there are going to be spoilers?
Yes, there will be spoilers,
Okay.
because that will help all of you understand the movie a lot more and what we're talking about.
But honestly, like, the spoilers, at this point, I'll give, like, another heads up before the main one where we talk about the ending. But at this point, I don't think it's going to be that bad. You can still see it without having your takeaway change that much. So that brings me to, I want to talk about the horror. So there were some jump scares, but mostly it was scary in, like, a deeply unsettling, challenging, like, intellectual way for the last half hour at least, which is so much more effective than, you know, any sort of surface horror. You had to, like, it was always in the back of your head, essentially. Like, it wasn't just, you know, one scene and that's it, jump scare, but, like, it just made you think about what could potentially happen throughout the remainder of the movie, given the knowledge that they just gave you after some of their horror scenes. Yeah.
For example, I was talking about the mutations before, and essentially what the Shimmer does is that it acts as like a refraction. So it refracts everything. So communications, that's why they could never hear from the people in the Shimmer. But not only that, but DNA. So it was basically turning every creature into whatever was in that environment. So the crocodile, that was one of the horror scenes, had shark teeth and other animals' teeth in it. So it was becoming something else. And then there was another scene where one of the soldiers who was there before, his organs basically turned into vines, and he turned into this big, beautiful plant, but it was horrifying. It was actually beautifully horrifying. I don't know how you describe it. Remember that one scene?
That's like the whole movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wait, does he turn into a plant?
He turns in, essentially, like...
Well, no, I thought he's the guy who, had, like, his, like, head ripped off.
Essentially, but he still turned into, like, a tree kind of thing.
Yeah, it's, like, roots.
Yeah, but that's the biggest thing about this movie is, like, it's not only what happens to the characters, but it's, like, what they look like after.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And so, that's gonna make me... Okay, I'm gonna rant about the thing that my blog post was about. I did a blog post on this movie.
Yes! Prepare to be educated.
After I wrote this, Rahul FaceTimed me, like, 10 times over spring break.
Trying to figure out how, like, this actually exists.
So, honestly, though, people who aren't film majors are gonna think this is really dumb or, like, really out there. but that's fine. I'll accept it.
But if you like listen to her and you look for examples, you will find them, and it'll all make sense.
So, okay, I think that horror is usually about the body, and sci-fi is usually about the other.
Mm-hmm.
Other with a capital O. And so the combination of the two is always really, really interesting. This kind of, goes into, like, why do aliens always look at least vaguely anthropomorphic, at least vaguely like humans in movies, usually? I think it's partially from our lack of imagination, but also partially because that's what scares us the most, is something like us, but different.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, the Uncanny Valley exists, why people thought the Polar Express was, like, the worst thing in the world, because, it's, like, almost completely realistic, but not, and that movie is so gross. I can't watch the animation.
Okay,
I know Julia's gonna, like, slap me in the face later, but...
Yeah, that movie, I don't want to look at you right now.
I think it's a good movie. Oh god, I can't watch, like, Tom Hanks's face, but it's not actually his face. But that's why that freaks us out. So,
sure.
And that's, why, like, in the 20s, the introduction of avant-garde film focused on defamiliarization, making familiar things weird and off. And, in movies that have to do with aliens, where there's, a final face-off between the protagonist and the alien, I'm thinking especially in Signs, Shyamalan's film Signs, because there's a lot of mirroring there, but also in Alien. The alien is almost like a doppelganger who plays with that idea and fear of the other, but also kind of ourselves. So, speaking of, combining body horror with other or xenophobia horror, I thought about this movie in a sort of feminist way. First, we have an almost all-female cast. All the protagonists who go into the Shimmer are women. And also, they're the first soldiers, non-military personnel to go into the Shimmer. They're trying to, specifically, like, have a different type of team to see if it'll actually work this time around. And I thought it was also meaningful that this time around it was a team full of women. And throughout the movie, we just get a bunch of different body horror sci-fi tropes of what's called female objection, which is kind of derived from male anxieties about the woman's body. So we get a lot of unsettling imagery that evokes female reproductive organs and processes, which is big in Alien and, like, every other sci-fi film, really. Who was it? The screenwriter or the producer? Somebody involved in Alien, it wasn't Ridley Scott, said that, like, his specific goal was to make all the men in the audience cross their legs. That's why there's so many, like, images that evoke, like, oral rape and stuff like that. It's, the face hugger. And, there's just so much, there's, like, an overload of phallic imagery in that film. And I know all my friends are like, Alicia, stop talking about phallic imagery. But
yeah,
yeah,
and I don't think just your friends either.
Everywhere I go, they tell me. But yeah, and then the ship is literally called Mother in Alien. They get off the ship when they first land on that planet at the beginning, and they're walking around through this like womb like cavern, and the alien comes from eggs, and there's just so much bodily fluid. It's gross, and it's gross because it is referencing what's called the monstrous feminine, which is, male fears of the female body. And Annihilation is maybe even more explicit in, like, those references because it's literally about biology. It's, like, explicitly about biology. And the thing is, I think that it kind of subverts this whole thing by turning those feminine images into something more complex than just gore or something to make us feel uncomfortable or just, like, Freud.
Yeah.
There's lots of familiar motifs that we can point to as indicators of the alien or the other. I think a lot of this has been brought to the forefront since Stranger Things came out because it's revived this 80s sci-fi nostalgia. And so those images are, like, even more familiar to us right now. I think in Annihilation, this starts with when they go into the Shimmer. It's almost really lucid and embryonic. It's sort of like entering some sort of, I don't know, like, you don't know. And that's what's creepy. And the more prominent and familiar visual of this sort that I'm thinking of, though, in Annihilation, is the sci-fi trope of some sort of vaginal opening. And that is sometimes in the monster itself, or sometimes in a wall. It can be some sort of sinister portal leading to an unknown place. In Stranger Things, that's literally like the entrance to the Upside Down.
Yeah.
And it can lead to sort of like a cavernous womb space. And we get that in Annihilation at both the that mess hall place where they camp out for like a couple days, and then also at the Lighthouse. The first wall opening literally has torn a man apart. The guy we were talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, where the guy, basically, his organs turned into vines, and then he became this beautiful plant. But it was kind of reminiscent of a mother who has a child, and it's like in her, it's in the womb, basically. And then, this is my perspective of it, it went from that to turning into like something really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love you so much. Yeah, So when we first see this guy in a videotape that Oscar Isaac's character Kane took on the mission prior to the mission Lena goes on, the one before hers was like the failed mission. Oscar Isaac's character is the only one who got out. There's a videotape of them opening up this guy's chest, and his intestines are like kind of crawling around, and throughout the movie, there's also hints that something is going on beneath the character's skin. You see things kind of moving, and like it's like veins coming alive, and the concept of invasion is like essential body horror. It's like you don't want something inside of you, and
and
that's what being pregnant is.
yeah, and like even biologically, when you are pregnant, your body treats that basically the fetus as something that's foreign and something that needs to be attacked, and that's like actually a disease, I forget what it's called, where your body starts attacking the fetus that's in your body. But yeah, like it's scary. I'm a guy, and I'm like, I can't imagine something living inside me, and I think I am starting to see the whole what was it, monstrous feminine?
Yeah,
there you go.
Feminine.
Monstrous, yeah.
Yep, you got it. Also, this is where people are going to be like, that's a stretch. But in studying the monstrous feminine, there's a term called Femme Kasturi. Is that how you say it? I don't know. It's Latin, right? Anyways, it means castrating woman. So according to Barbara Creed, who's a big name in the study of the abject feminine, she says that you can define it by related intimately to the problem of sexual difference and castration, and that women have been, quote, constructed as biological freaks whose bodies represent a fearful and threatening form of sexuality. She's basically saying the female body is alien, menacing, and maybe even a failed version of the male. It's different, and it's related to this fear of castration or swallowing, really. Not to be too graphic. No, to be way too graphic, actually. So, when I see this guy who's literally torn apart inside this, like, weird vine structure, and his head is forever frozen, like, mid-decapitation, that's what I thought of. And
yeah. I mean, there was another scene that really stuck out to me was there's the crocodile that I was talking about that had all those different teeth. So he had basically rows of teeth. When you looked into it, it kind of reminded me of that one Star Wars scene where I forget what it's called, the Pit of Something.
Wait, which Star Wars?
The fifth one. I forget which planet they're on, but essentially you throw your enemies into the pit. Boba Fett was in it, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's called Vagina Dentata. Yeah. So it's describes a folktale in which a woman's vagina is said to contain teeth associated with the implication that sexual intercourse might result in injury, emasculation, or castration. So yeah, that was a big thing I saw when it came to
I'm so proud of you right now. God. Yeah, so that scene, like, so it also reminded me of, there was a movie a couple years ago, well, 2007, directed by Mitchell Lichtenstein called Teeth. It's like a horror satire film playing with the idea of vagina dentata, the male fear of being consumed or castrated by female sexual organs, because the protagonist literally has a vagina with teeth. So, during the crocodile scene, when Lena is inspecting the crocodile's teeth, and everybody seems pretty antsy, I just thought it was interesting how Lena was, like, not scared at all. She's just looking at it scientifically with decreasing fear and increasing fascination, which is not to be expected. So I think it's, in that instance, it's an example of subverting that traditional fear of images like that. And additionally, all the women in the troupe who goes into the Shimmer are experiencing some sort of change or trauma having to do with their body. For example, Natalie Portman's Lena is weighed down by guilt after cheating on her missing husband, and she admits to hating herself, and maybe she despises her body equally because of her sexual infidelity. And her quarrel with her alien counterpart, which we'll talk about later, is literally a struggle with her own body. And then in terms of the rest of the group, Josie has her self-harm, Dr. Ventress has her illness, Anya has her addiction, and Shepard has lost a child. And when she's telling Lena about this, she says that the loss of her child is really two losses. It's of her child and also of the person she herself once was. So she's kind of mourning both her own body and an extension of it. Yeah, do you have anything to add about that?
No, not really. I mean, no, I mean, it's interesting because you can definitely see by the end of the movie how Lena, like, completely changes, and that goes back to me talking about why, the interviewer's name again. What was the interviewer's name?
Oh, Lomax?
Yeah, Lomax. I mean, that's a good indication of why he was so important to the film, because he, in my opinion, was like what we were comparing against. Mm-hmm. Like, he was him asking those questions helped us figure out how she changed. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but that's the way I saw it.
No, I see that. And so Alex Garland's last movie, Ex Machina, builds on the sci-fi history of associating the threat of technology, specifically AI, with the sexualized or feminine other. And more contemporary films like Blade Runner and Her also might come to mind. It's the same deal. But, like, this whole idea of the, castrating woman can be traced all the way back to Weimar cinema, with Fritz Lang's Metropolis from 1927. The main character, played by Bridget Helm, has an evil robotic double who is a machine, but at the same time explicitly sexual. And her portrayal of both those characters is symptomatic of the patriarchy's parallel fears of both women and machines at the time, because both of those things threatened the system's control. This was just, like, everywhere in early cinema. Symbolism linking women with technology. And yeah, we've had that a lot since then. But again, the thing that I think this movie does differently is it looks at the female body as something beautiful in its mystery instead of terrifying in its mystery. Well, maybe both. The Shimmer overall is this, like, beautiful terrarium, and everything is lush and fertile and ethereal and alarming because you don't understand it. And it involves the bodies of whoever exists inside it to change. And the constant changes that occur to a woman's body throughout her life can be seen as, the same sort of thing. Those who go into the Shimmer are physically invaded by some alien entity, And what's more terrifying than the idea of a foreign creature crawling beneath your own skin? And, that's, as we talked about, maybe linked to a fear of pregnancy and birth, whether you're a man or a woman. But I think the main takeaway is that the Shimmer is only dangerous if you perceive it that way. Instead, if you see it as how you were talking about, like a beautiful thing or a natural process or life force, something powerful in its elegance, like the way that Tessa Thompson's character does, Josie, then that's what it's going to be. So, in the scene with Lomax when he says that the Shimmer destroys and Lena says, no, it was just changing things, it shows that it could become the same thing of beauty in our own eyes as an audience. It's a creator rather than a destructor, and it's not a weapon or a monster or a threat to humanity, but instead a creative life force and natural power source, like the way that the female body might be. Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Said. No, that was well said. No, I mean, like, even when you think about the Shimmer's not introducing anything new. It's just taking what is in the environment and putting it together differently. It's just refracting things. And that just kind of illustrates, like, that's just how nature is. I don't know, like, this is very existential, but the human race, like, 1,000 years from now, if we are still around, is not going to be anywhere near the same of what it is now. And we'd probably be terrified of what it looks like, or how the people in it behave. And so that just goes to show that, like, change and evolution is natural. Mm-hmm. And even though it's scary because it pretty much destroys what we are, it doesn't mean it's the end of anything. Yeah. It's just continuance with some modification.
And it kind of shows us how hypocritical we are in, like, our change, as we can, like, see in our really impressive colonialism resume, is like incredibly violent.
Yeah.
And while this type of change, how can we possibly react so intuitively negatively to it when it's natural and peaceful and not violent in any way, really? And I think there's also a lot of potential, like, religious allusions here. I was listening to another podcast that talked about Cain's name being Cain, and his, he and his, it's not a brother, but his doppelganger, who's, an extension of himself. Yeah, like, one of them destroys the other, and, overall this is a story of creation. Also, when I've been studying the creation narrative in the Torah in one of my classes here, basically, the way that one of the narratives in Genesis tells the story of the creation of the world is God ordering things. He's not creating things out of nothing. He's taking chaos, like pre-existing chaos and a pre-existing world, and just ordering them, organizing them, taming the chaos, and keeping it under control. So that's really interesting in the context of this movie, how it's somehow creating by just changing, like shifting things around. Should we talk about the end?
Yeah, that ending just blew my mind.
Yeah, you came out of that theater like when a 9th grader sees his first Tame Impala music video.
Like... Oh, I thought that was going so differently. I was like, oh, sure. I mean, I just saw my first Tame Impala music video like a month ago. I'm 20 years old now.
Oh,
still in 9th grade.
Yeah. But, yeah, so basically to overview, Lena goes into the lighthouse. She finds Dr. Ventress. Dr. Ventress kind of becomes part of the Shimmer, which is a very boiled down way of saying that. And then Lena ends up having herself kind of multiplied, or another version of her born out of the Shimmer, and she has to, like, physically wrestle with her other self. And it's similar to the way that Cain had to do the same thing to the other version of himself that Lena saw in the video that Cain left behind. So I especially liked the visuals of Lena's doppelganger. I thought that was so weird. It was like her in a morph suit.
Yeah, completely blacked out. You couldn't tell. You couldn't even actually tell if it was a man or a woman.
Yeah, which I especially liked.
Yeah, so it was just a human, if you could call it that.
Yeah.
You couldn't see any features on the person except that it had like a human shape. And the interesting thing about that creature is that at first it seemed that they were fighting. So every time Lena would make a move to get out or something like that, the creature would prevent her and kind of follow that same motion. But Lena then ends up realizing that the creature is basically just mirroring her every movement. Now that is what happened. I don't know the significance behind it. Do you know what that could potentially
No.
be?
I mean,
you could go along the phrase saying like it's us battling our inner demons. And
yeah,
that
I think it's so many things.
Yeah, so I mean, like whenever we want to take a step to help ourselves or something like that, when we think it's like outside factors that are hurting us, it's actually our own internal factors.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you can help yourself is by recognizing that you are your own worst enemy at times, and that you need to figure out how you are so you don't make those same mistakes the next time around. Very easier said than done. I think that was like a good way, a physical representation of like how basically we're just stopping ourselves from accomplishing what we want. So I'll remember that exact scene when I'm, I don't know, trying to study for an exam and someone offers me like to not study for an exam. I am fighting myself in a morph suit. That's exactly what that conflict is.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about this being a good metaphor for mental illness and depression and stuff, addiction, and I agree that ties back to how each of the women in the team is, struggling with some sort of internal conflict. And I think it serves that purpose for sure. And it also, I just don't know. It's definitely a source of ambiguity at the end, because one of the Canes destroys the other, and one of the Lenas destroys the other. And at first it seems like, from watching it, it looks like Lena is the one that got out, and she destroyed her, like, Shimmer version of herself. But, at the end of the movie, the last shot, spoiler, is, Kane, one of the Canes, and one of the Lenas hugging, and, Lena has, like, a shimmer glimmer in her eye.
Yeah.
Shimmer glimmer. And, apparently in the screenplay, Garland specifically wrote out, like, we cannot tell which Lena got out.
I that's where I find fault, because within the movie itself, the shimmer was technically in everyone. So there was a scene where Lena analyzed her blood under a microscope and saw the shimmer was in her own blood. So maybe it is fair, actually, that you.
I'm saying I think that's its point, is that it's not like one of them is the true Lena and one of them isn't.
Yeah. They were both different.
Yeah.
They're both completely changed.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how she kind of, at the end, her responses to the interviewer are similar to the responses that Kane has to Lena at the beginning of the film, when he comes out of the Shimmer. He comes home after disappearing for a year, and she's like, where the hell were you? Tell me about this mission. Can you tell me anything? Like, asking for specifics. And he's just sitting there, and he's like, does it really matter? And she's like, of course it fucking does. And at the end, she's kind of the same way.
Yeah, she
has some sort of wider understanding of the world. She's focused on something else.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. And Alicia made a good point after the movie, saying that at first she was all upset about cheating on her husband that may or may not be alive, and then nearing the end of it, she's like, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Now, in our real day lives, like, if you cheat on your significant other and they come back, I think it kind of does matter. That's
even if you go into the Shimmer and come back out, like, what happens in the Shimmer doesn't stay in the Shimmer.
It's not like band camp.
Come on. Band camp.
But, like, it made a good point of saying that, like, there's going to be some things that happen in your life that are completely shitty, and it doesn't even, like, have logical sense. No matter how hard you try and understand it, and you just kind of have to sometimes move on and take it for what it is, which is hard, which is really hard. But that is the only way you can approach certain things, and I think that's maybe the significance that was trying to be made of that scene.
Yeah. I think also it ties back to the idea of sci-fi typically dealing with xenophobia, but, you know, in this case, she herself is the alien, and we're all kind of the aliens, and we're indistinguishable from them, which is the scariest part. And in that way, you know, the movie's talking about annihilation and self-destruction. Dr. Ventress goes on that whole little, like, monologue about the difference between suicide and self-destruction. She was like, we all came on this mission because we want to self-destruct. And I think it's interesting how in this sci-fi movie, there's a focus on self-destruction instead of xenophobic destruction. Instead of violently going after the foreign entity is us, and that's even more unsettling.
That does scare me. That really does scare me.
Well, on that positive note, do you have anything else to...
Overall, I think the movie, it took me for a loop for sure, just trying to, like, understand what it was. Like, nearing the end, there was a scene where I think you get a chance to see, like, what the Shimmer really is, and they were asking about whether the Shimmer was an alien or something like that, and I think they came to the conclusion that it was an alien.
Mm-hmm. And at the beginning it shows, like, an asteroid or something coming to the Earth and, like, hitting the lighthouse.
Yeah, and they were just asking, like, what did it want, and I think the response was, and something that I think was just a kind of nice way to end the movie, was that it wasn't trying to, you know, take over anything, it wasn't trying to do anything, essentially. It was just there.
Mm-hmm.
And
she was like, I don't think it wants anything.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into the whole, like, xenophobia thing. Now, of course, from their perspective, it was destroying everything, making it worse, but at the same time, we saw creatures that we didn't even think were humanly possible. We saw trees that were people, essentially, and we saw people become plants. Things that scare us, but I don't think that's actually, you know, what it would look like if the alien could talk. You know, like, and so to tie it back to the whole, like, xenophobic argument, people do things that we completely don't understand and actually looks to us as if it's supposed to be destroying our culture or anything like that, but in their eyes it's not. It's just their culture, essentially, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to change with that and adapt, because even though parts of our culture may not be around anymore, that doesn't mean that those other parts aren't worth anything. The foreigners' parts.
Yeah. I like that. I like that as an ending. It's relevant. People today are very afraid of what they perceive to be foreign. People today are scared of being culturally displaced. They consider things and places to be their own, even if they took it from somebody else. And if they get something taken away from them, even if it's literally just to attempt to begin to balance the scales, they see it as a violent attack. Yeah, I think that's a good observation. So, I guess go see Annihilation.
Go see it.
It's kind of still playing. It's like trickling through theaters.
It'll probably make its way to Netflix.
Yeah, I guess. But don't do that, because Alex Garland is gonna fucking come for you.
He's gonna just fucking do it. He's gonna show up in a black morph bodysuit and mirror your every image.
Oh, no. Go to an academic building, go to Tucker at the College of William and Mary.
Yes.
And screen that movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go to your local Wawa, grab yourself a burrito.
Freshman year, I got a second-degree burn from a breakfast burrito from Wawa. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate your making the journey through this, and I hope to be posting again soon.
Yes. Listen to this over your next breakfast.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Drifting